Joining us now, NBC's Yamiche Alcindor, and also with us, retired ATF Special Agent in Charge, Jim Kavanagh, and civil rights attorney and former prosecutor, Charles Coleman. Yamiche, what is the latest reaction we're getting to this ruling?
Well, what we're really hearing from is both sides of the political aisles here, with Republicans largely saying that they're going to respect or celebrate this decision, and Democrats saying this is a decision that really needs to be rectified by Congress. So with that in mind, let's take a listen to what we've been hearing from Capitol Hill and the lawmakers there.
It's a fantastic ruling, not surprising. I would expect it to be done, and frankly, that's, I think, an indication of where we'll be on the pistol brace ban as well. It was a foolish mistake under both administrations.
The Supreme Court has been on a rampage with respect to the ability of states and localities to pass reasonable gun safety measures.
So there you have it, Republicans and that Republican lawmaker saying essentially, I'm in favor of this ruling. And then you have someone like Jamie Raskin, of course, a high-profile Democrat, saying that he doesn't agree with this. Now, I want to also read Senate Majority Leader Schumer's statement here. And let me read it here. He said, as I warned the Trump administration at the time, the only way to permanently close this loophole is through legislation. Senate Democrats are ready to pass legislation to ban bump stocks, but we will need votes from Senate Republicans. So there you have it. Of course, we should remind folks that Justice Alito, in his concurring opinion, which means that, of course, he agreed with this opinion in that 6-3 decision that went along ideological lines. Justice Alito was saying that really it has to be Congress that would pass a law that would ban bump stocks. So you have now Senate Majority Leader Schumer saying, let's do that, but we're going to need Republicans on board. I also want to just remind people there's the presidential politics at play here. This was a 2018 ban on bump stocks that went into effect under Donald Trump. He was supportive of it at the time. So was the NRA, though the NRA has backtracked. You now have the Trump campaign saying that they're going to respect this decision, but that they are still friends of the gun rights advocates community. But then you have someone like President Biden and the Biden campaign that are saying that this decision says that Trump justices, that they are putting safety of communities behind the gun lobby. So very interesting here, and all that's sort of the reaction we're hearing on the political front. Anna?
Yamiche, thanks so much for that reporting. Jim, the court says bump stocks don't fit the definition of a machine gun, saying, quote, a bump stock does not alter the basic mechanics of bump firing, and that the trigger must still be released and re-engaged to fire each additional shot. You know guns well. Do you agree?
No, I mean, the Supreme Court is dead wrong. Unfortunately for America, we're going to suffer the consequences. If you see someone fire a bump stock or have fired a bump stock, you pull the trigger back and hold that gun against your shoulder. You don't pull the trigger manually. And the 1934 National Firearms Act that regulated submachine guns described a submachine gun, a machine gun, as a weapon that fires more than one shot by a single function of the trigger. A bump stock turns a rifle into a submachine gun. I mean, this is not even a legal question. Oh, they're trying to say that the ATF director doesn't have the administrative authority. They could have easily said in this case, look, if Congress wants to ban the ATF director's ruling says bump stocks are submachine guns, and if Congress wants to make them legal, they can pass a law and do that. They could have easily said that. Just the same administrative issue. Congress can pass a rule and say bump stocks are legal. But no, they allowed these things now to be out, and I'm sure they're being manufactured as we speak, and we're going to see the market flooded with them, Anna, and they're going to be on the street. They're going to kill our law enforcement officers. If you see a person fire one of these next to someone firing a submachine gun, you can't tell the difference. It'll put out 600 rounds a minute. A human being cannot pull the trigger that fast. That's why this mechanism turns the gun into a submachine gun. And if you have any B-roll that shows that, I mean, you'd have to be the village idiot to say it's not. It's too clever by halfway to get by the law. The spirit of the law, the reason for the law in 1934 because of the gangsters, Pretty Boy Floyd massacred the 4 law enforcement officers at the Union train station in Kansas City, the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, all these, Bonnie and Clyde killing policemen with a BAR. All these machine guns were ravaging America, and Congress passed that law. And now we have this ruling trying to go on a legal technicality, which is nonsensical, to try to tell you that it's not a submachine gun. It is a submachine gun.
Even many of the justices during oral arguments talked about the carnage, and the intention of that machine gun ban was to limit the type of carnage. And you just think about 60 people being killed with hundreds injured by one man who had this bump stock and these devices at the Las Vegas Music Festival. And by the way, when this bump stock ban initially was instituted just a few years ago, there were some 520,000+ of the bump stocks already circulating. Charles, I'm wondering, could this ruling now sort of open the door to other challenges on other types of gun restrictions? What are the broader legal ramifications here?
I would expect so, Anna. I think that when you're looking at what this ruling signifies, it is an invitation, if you will, to a pro Second Amendment folks to try and push as much as they can in the spaces that they are now questioning. And I think that the Supreme Court essentially punted for many of the reasons that Jim already talked about. They could have directly addressed this issue. I understand legally why they took the route of basically saying that ATF did not have the authority, if you will, to try and make these regulations, but they could have made it very clear. And it is very interesting that Congress has already picked up on the notion that they've given them a pathway to fix this if you want to legislate. But what the Supreme Court has done with a decision like this, Anna, is they've basically said, look, if you want to bring these cases, we're going to find a way to allow them to breathe, to give them breathing room. And that has dangerous implications if you're someone who is looking to have and pass and keep common sense gun legislation.
And to save lives, potentially, in this sort of a situation. It's all about saving lives. Jim, talking about federal versus state laws when it comes to gun rights, 18 states already have their own bump stock bans, according to Everytown for Gun Safety. So what do you think ATF enforcement will look like with these, different state and federal regulations?
Yeah, it's going to be a scientific wild-ass mess because you're going to have states that, have them illegal, and other manufacturers are going to be pumping these things out to make money. And, they can be trafficked across the state lines. But it's going to be a mess. It's unbelievable they would make that decision. Really, if you shoot one of these things, you just can't believe that someone could not call it. I mean, my description, Anna, is like a guy's on a boat and he hangs 4 tires off the side, and the Coast Guard pulls up and said, "We want to inspect your boat." He says, "You can't inspect it because it's a car. It has 4 wheels." I mean, it's nonsense. It's nonsense. And it's really sad. I mean, I can't believe they did it. The other part of the argument, and of course Charles can go deeper than me, I'm sure, but when they argue about the administrative state, again, that's a silly argument as well. Look, the ATF has to decide on all kinds of devices. I don't know the number exactly, but scores and hundreds during the year. Is this thing a silencer? Is this thing a firearm? Does this thing change a firearm? They're sent in by the bucket loads. Are they saying that ATF can't make those decisions, that everyone then has to go to the Supreme Court? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Cops make decisions administratively every day. Is this careless driving? Is this reckless driving? You have to make a decision based on the law. You can't call the judge and say, well, is it? You have to decide. And the ATF director did, and he made the right decision. And the Supreme Court is just dead wrong.
Charles, what do you think of Justice Sotomayor's dissent, where she says of the decision, quote, that this majority opinion casts aside Congress's definition of machine gun and seizes upon one that is inconsistent with the ordinary meaning of the statutory text and unsupported by context or purpose?
I think that when you're trying to get to a particular conclusion that does not jive with your facts, you have to go around and say things that are nonsensical. And Justice Sotomayor is pointing that out. She's basically saying there is a common sense definition that has support in the law for what a machine gun is. And in order to reach this decision, in order to actually punt in the way that the majority has decided to, you had to go around that common sense definition. And she's pointing that out. She's pointing out something else, though, I think that is important, which is Congress's ability to fix all of this through legislation. Basically saying that, look, you have found the most egregious and obscure way of looking at the interpretation of statutorily, at least, machine guns, but you can fix it, Congress, if you basically change the definition or be more specific. The problem with that, Anna, is that, to Jim's point, how many times are you going to have to do this with how many different accessories and attachments that weapons can have, such that we don't constantly find ourselves here again and again where Congress has to redefine every single attachment, a scope, a silencer, a bunt stock that can be applied to a weapon to change how it functions. And that's a real issue that I think that dissent actually points out in a subtle way.
And I think you touched on this, Jim, but just how concerned are you that there could now be a massive boom to the rapid fire marketplace? Now that this ban is gone, what does this mean for public safety?
Well, no, it's a bad day. It's a bad day at BlackRock here because these manufacturers are going to be pumping these things out now to make money, to make millions of dollars. They've been waiting for this ruling. There's the video that proves the Supreme Court's decision is wrong. You see that shooter, he's holding the trigger. He's not pulling the trigger with his finger manually. He's not moving his finger back and forth. He's just holding it against his shoulder, and it's firing the gun. We'll have, great lawyers like Charles on there that can explain to us the Supreme Court and all these things. But I'm telling you, this decision isn't a legal one. It's a wrong one. Because if you just look at the way the gun works, there's only one pull of the trigger, and it's held back against your shoulder, and it empties the magazine. And so they just made a wrong ruling for America, and it's going to kill and hurt a lot of people.
Well, I appreciate your expertise, your passion. Jim Kavanagh, Charles Coleman, and Yamiche Alcindor, thank you all so much.